Please welcome to the stage Professor Milton Mermikides.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me. Now, we humans are very late to the life on this planet. Like gate crashers, we show up right at the last minute. And it may well be that the music started without us. And this sentiment was put forward beautifully by the Roman poet-philosopher Lucretius, who intimates that perhaps it's the animals who taught us music. Thus, birds instructed man and taught us songs before art began. It's a beautiful idea, but is there any evidence for it? Well, when we look back to ancient music forms, we do find this connection between music and animals which inspire it. Take the gongxin, this ancient Chinese zither, which goes back 3,000 years. Now, it's this beautiful, very simple instrument. It's like a tabletop fretless guitar. And it has very specific techniques. Look at these finger positions here. We'll see some of these in action. Now, these techniques are very precise and particular. And the study of them was meant to not just enhance your musicality, but also your connection to the natural world. And these early handbooks included these instructions. But how do you teach these particular movements? What they used were these wonderful diagrams which envisioned the particular animals. Here, you're plucking a string with 2 fingers, and just as a wild goose plucks a reed stalk with its bill. And there are many such beautiful, colorful analogies. I like cold ravens pecking at snow for staccato. It's the fact they're cold is so wonderful. Or the cry of a monkey while climbing a tree for vibrato. It's so particular. Let's take one in particular, white butterflies exploring flowers. What could that possibly mean? Well, butterflies are light, and they're very precise in their movement, and they land and then disappear. And that is exactly the technique you need to perform a harmonic on an open string. You have to find a precise position, press very lightly, and then disappear, leaving this white spectral tone. So let's hear some butterflies. But it's not just ancient music forms that have this connection to animals. The late, great blues guitarist Stevie Ray Vaughan talked about how the blues was inspired by the sounds around the player, such as a person walking or a train sound, or as he puts it,
a horse walking, That's where these rhythms came from.
So what is the rhythm of a horse walking? Well, let's listen to it. Let's just take a little section of that. Notice it's got this swing. Da, ga, do, da, go, da, go. And not only does it have a swing, there's a sort of added height, brightness to the shorter note. Gadum, gadum. And this is the heartbeat of the Texas shuffle. Here's a horse walking. And here's a Texas shuffle. That messy swing, isn't that wonderful? And they're so infused with each other that you can just lay them on top of each other and switch between the two. And it's hard to tell where one starts and the other ends. And instruments can make all sorts of extraordinary animal-like sounds. The late, great Van Halen used to love making elephant noises. So let's remind ourselves what an elephant sounds like, in case you've not heard one recently. Now, these are 3 different calls, but they share a characteristic. They have these sort of rich harmonic clusters. You can see them there. They also have a sort of soft horn-like attack, soft beginning and a soft release also. And they have this microtonal glide, a pitch bend through them. So how on earth can we do that with a guitar? Well, we can make these harmonic clusters with 3 butterflies, distortion and harmonics. This gives us the sonic clay. It doesn't sound like an elephant yet. What if we soften the beginning with the volume control? But that leaves the pitch bend. We can do that with a whammy bar at the same time. And suddenly we have an elephant. In fact, it sounds so much like an elephant, I can't tell which is which when I play them next to each other. Pretty good. But animals have all sort of characters and movements that we can be inspired by in music. In fact, they can be fast or slow, or heavy or light, or have characters of nobility, elegance, mischief, or mystery. But music, too, has its own parameters that we can map these animals against. And this is what Saint-Saëns did in his Carnival of the Animals. For example, if we want to represent an elephant musically, not just its sound, well, it's slow and heavy, so we make low sounds and a slow tempo. And it's somewhat noble, so we give it the noble key of E flat and a horn-like tone. And we get elephant music. We all know that to be an elephant. Donkeys, wild donkeys, are very fast, in fact, but they're also quite weighty. So we keep the pitch low to start with and then have high subdivisions. Kangaroos, of course, bounce, so we can do that in pitch space, but they also stop and look around with curiosity. What of fish? Well, fish are fast, light, and mysterious, but the water around them is slow, and you can hear those 2 layers here. The slow water and the fast twinkling fish. The reverse happens with the swan. We have fast rippling water and then the slow elegance of the swan's melody on top. Listen to the ripples in the piano. And I love how Saint-Saëns also includes pianists in this list of animals with all their clumsy, silly noises that we make. I don't know what animals would think of this. So animals are so diverse, but we have so many ways of expressing ourselves in music. There are endless ways we can embed animals in our music. Like this symphony, which embeds the shape of a cat into its melodic contour. Now, this is very beautiful and inspiring, but there are more direct ways that we can bring animals into the musical world. And this was actually remarked upon by Samuel Pepys in his diaries just 25 days before the Great Fire, where he bumped into Robert Hooke, who is actually an early Gresham professor of geometry. And Pepys says of the meetings that he discoursed with Mr. Hooke about the nature of sounds. And essentially, Hooke said that he could tell how fast an insect's wing was beating by the musical pitch that it produced. So essentially, wing speed made a frequency which made a musical pitch, which means we can draw a direct line between animal movement and music. So how do insects move? Well, they make rapid but small motions generally, with occasional lurches. So they tend to have these moves that are very fast changes of direction, then these lurches that move around there. Of course, I'm cheating here because this isn't the movement of an insect, it's the movement of a piece of music. So Rimsky-Korsakov intuited the motion of a bee into the melody itself. But of course, bees don't move in a straight line. We tend to go left to right when we think about time, but they move all over the place. Here's a pattern. In fact, they have very sophisticated moving motions where they move around areas like traveling salesmen, very efficient in their use, and they also scurry a certain area, like that top right quadrant. But this happens in music also, because we can think about pitch not just as up and down, but distance, let's say, from the hive. And then our circular trajectory is the melodic direction. So if we go up, we turn left. If we go down, we turn right. And then we map the same notes onto that bee, and suddenly you get very bee-like motions. Look at these little circles, they're so convincing. So this is not me animating, it's me just feeding the notes. Look how here it does that scurrying in the top right quadrant. Get away from me. Now it starts to lurch. Look how close these look, the same sort of scurrying activity in these wells. Of course, there are many animals and many ways to move. Birds fly by exerting a lot of wing flap energy and then reaching a certain height where they can coast for a while, then they have to repeat. More energy to get higher. Sometimes they tumble because of the climate, sometimes they're lifted by thermal lifts. And if you haven't guessed it already, this is the melody of the lark ascending. Flaps that bring us to a height. More effort, more height. Then we get what would be called a hovering display. We don't need to flap so often. Then the wind stops. Until we catch an uplift and reach soaring height. But if any animal behavior has inspired music the most, it's undoubtedly birdsong. This is just a partial list going back 3,000 years. Just a sample of the pieces that have been inspired directly by birdsong. And there are reasons why birdsong is so connected to the music that we know. Firstly, birds, it seems, use what's called pitch categories, distinct different pitches. Here's something like a G and F of a nightingale. And they also have something that could be described as ornamentation, trills and accelerandos. They also have what we might call rhythmic units, repeated, clear rhythmic phrases like this quail. And when you put rhythmic categories and pitch units together, you get melodies and motifs, like the cuckoo. And it's so clearly melodic that you can slow it down and put it in any key you want. And of course, who noticed this was Beethoven, who embedded these three birds in the Pastoral. You can see them, he has even named them. The cuckoo appears here. The quail. And the nightingale with its two notes and some kind of trilling behavior. And in the scene by the brook, you hear these birds appear. So I'll play you that sequence with the inspirational birds overlaid. No conversation about birdsong and music should miss a mention of Messiaen, the 20th century composer who dedicated himself to the musical capture of, I think, many of the bird species in France. He felt that birds were the greatest musicians on the planet, and the birds taught him thousands of invented chords. And he wrote this collection of pieces, Catalogue d'oiseaux, the catalogue of birds, performed by his wife, an exceptional pianist, Yvonne Loriot. Here's a little vignette of the process. Messiaen would go out, notate these birds, and really absorb their sound, and then translate them just to solo piano.
Voici le râle de genêt. C'est lui, il fait...
Nailed it. He had 77 different bird species from 24 wildernesses that he collected into 13 piano pieces over 7 books. That takes about 2.5 hours to play. So he wasn't messing around. And this catalogue is ornithology and travel journal and musicology and composition, and also an expression of his faith. He found these as like divine messengers, these birds. Here's the absolutely adorable golden oriole. So colorful, so beautiful. And he said, I give bird songs for those who dwell in cities and paint colors for those who see none. Such a beautiful sentiment. He was actually capturing the landscape also. And these are musical portraits and tributes, blending faith, beauty, and a musical representation of nature. But perhaps birdsong isn't for us, it's for other birds. Birds live their life very quickly and fleetingly. And a lot of their bird songs go by super quickly. And even Messiaen with his amazing ears couldn't catch it all. So is a way of hearing within these bird songs and capturing a hidden music, perhaps. Well, if we take the song thrush, whose name Philomelos means lover of melody, you get this little 6-second call. But slowing it down, we start to hear this musical detail that would be lost. Let's play it at human speed, not bird speed. That's just the first phrase there. And if you give this to a fine professional musician to transcribe exactly, not to our pitches of the piano, but these microtonal pitches, and not the easy convenience of rhythmic notation on the page, but this loose, precise off-griddedness, then you get an extraordinary melody. Here's the song thrush call performed by Emily Andrus. Emily, everybody. Emily's here. Round of applause, please. But here's the thing. We can take that recording and speed it back up to bird speed. And it sounds just like the call. But you don't have to believe me. You can believe my bird call app, which we managed to trick with a piccolo. There you go. And there are endless bird calls we can discover. The Eurasian wren is super fast, so we have to slow it down to the 8th speed. Here is its 5-second call. Now, lost in that little moment is what I can only describe as Eurasian jazz. It's the most beautiful melody, which I know because I've been transcribing it. I know by heart now and starting to incorporate in my solos. Here is the 8th speed, 3-octave down Eurasian wren melody performed on flute. The wren plays along. And back up to speed. And what's wonderful about this is that this melody is just hidden in the airs and with 1,000 other ancient songs hiding in plain sounds, essentially. And although bird calls evolve rapidly, the basis of these motifs are likely thousands, if not millions of years old. So it's just an astonishing fact that we are surrounded by this music. And so we should think a little more broadly about music and animals, because there's music we can hear from the animals that are beyond our hearing. Birds are just on the edge of it. But elephants, for example, use infrasonics. We'll catch the top end of this to communicate over long distances. I need to make an album with these guys. The southern brown tree frog is extraordinary because it can switch frequencies like a radio broadcaster. And it's been observed doing this to escape the noise of human activity. So they find their own channel. You can hear a little bit of that radio tuning here. And bats communicate in the ultrasonic range, way above what we can hear. This is a mating call of these bats. I'm going to play them at bat speed and then slowly transpose them down. As we do so, we'll start to hear their communications come into sound. Quarter speed. And eighth speed. This is saying, hey, baby. So we've talked about taking animals and putting them into our music. But let's talk now not about animals in music, but music in animals. Do animals actually feel music, at least our music? Now, of course, with enough patience and treats, you can make animals do almost anything.
Oh.
But do they actually enjoy that? And it probably seems like an unanswerable question, but there are cunning ways to find out. Let me introduce you to Sakura, a 5-month-old human-raised female chimpanzee, which you will come to love as much as I do. And Sakura was given a choice of consonant and dissonant music. Not a loud, horrible sound and a soft one, but a piece of music which was altered to fit within a key or not. It was actually Baroque minuets. And the experiment allowed Sakura to pull a string to keep the music going, or to not pull and the music would end, and she would have to wait for the channel to switch. And they wanted to see how long she would pull for consonant versus dissonant music. The dissonant music, by the way, was just the same passage of music with just some alterations of accidentals. So this is some consonant music, and you'll see how Sakura responds to it. She cuddles up, exhibits relaxation responses, and then wants a little bit more music, doesn't she? To soothe herself. Now let's give Sakura some dissonant music. Same passage with just some alterations, and you'll see how differently she responds. Not impressed. Stays stock still, just waiting for it to be over. waits. Give her the constant music again, and she can't get enough of it. Give me more. I know. So music amongst us humans is used to elicit and convey emotion, to evoke empathy, which might be a way of testing whether animals feel this also. Not just pleasantries, but a sense of communication. Let's listen to some human music which you might find particularly communicative. Did you feel something at that point? I'll isolate the vocals and show you the voice alone. Hear those rich harmonics there. Now that's, of course, incredible singing, but there's something about that frequency range that we respond to immediately. And it's hypothesized it's because it's linked to the frequency range that babies occupy when they want to elicit our care and attention. Not quite as pleasant, but it has the same effect. There's this alerting sense. You take notice. It's a bit troubling, but you want to care for that person. Astonishingly, it turns out that domestic cats do that to us also. So the work of Karen McComb showed that domestic cats alter their purrs if they want to get something out of us, from a low purr to this tweaked region. I'll show you the switch between the two. That's how the buggers do it. So we are being played by three groups of people: babies, musicians, and now cats. And once more with feeling. So animals can evoke empathy. What other musical characteristics do they have? Well, one aspect of music is being able to keep a pulse, hold one. And it's astonishing to think that any animal could do this, or why would they need to? But growing up in Greece, we were surrounded by the sound of the Eurasian, what we later discovered was the Eurasian scops owl, although we used to call it the metro bird, because its pulse of one hoot was so regular that Bridget and I used to play guitar along to it. It rivaled professional musicians in its metric consistency. And what's really amazing, if that's one pitch, other individual owls have different tempos that they hold in slightly different pitches. So you start to get this lovely cross rhythm, these melodies that emerge. So I'll give you an idea of how it sounds like when we played along to these owls. And this is found sound of those owls, and we're just playing along. Bridget on guitar. So keeping a pulse is one thing, but can animals respond to a pulse or a groove? And the answer for much of our history was no. There's no way they can do that. That's a uniquely human ability. In fact, chimpanzees cannot do that. Until one useful thing came out of the internet was the discovery of this guy called Snowball. Now, I don't believe everything on the internet, but this beautiful sulfur-crested cockatoo is the first non-human animal to be scientifically tested and able to hear a groove and dance along to it. It's so astonishing that the neuroscientist Patel said that he wouldn't be more surprised if he saw a dog reading a newspaper out loud. And if you're not seeing this yet, you're in for a treat. So what will happen is the music will start, and Snowball will respond within about 2 or 3 beats. And not only will it respond, it will do what we tend to do with dancing, which it will have binary ratios. You move your feet and your head either at the same time or a 2-to-1 or a 4-to-1 ratio. Check this out. Who's got it? Now watch the feet. Now it comes a backbeat here, I think. Here we go.
No sound but the sound of the sea. Machine guns ready to go. Are you ready? Are you ready for this?
And Snowball has 14 distinct dance moves, which is 12 more than me, by the way. And he apparently responds to changes in texture in the music. You can see when it changes here. So here's a few little dance moves of Snowball for you. It's coming up to the 4-bar section, and
Another one bites the dust.
here you go.
Another one.
And you'll notice that when the beat stops, he stops dancing. It's not like he just carries on. In fact, as soon as the beat drops, you'll see him hang his foot in the air awkwardly. And you can see that he's also learned to mimic not just dancing from human movement, but celebration at the end.
Was that it? Hey, take a look, take a look. Woo! Yay, Snowball, you're the treat.
And so it turns out that beat induction and diversity of movement to music is not uniquely human. It tends to be around the cockatoos, which has this blend of biology, auditory responses, and movements to sound, as well as social bonding and mimicry seem to be the mix. But strangely, there's a little of that evidence of that found in sea lions also. Scaled down to the same tempo, but they're all dancing to a shared beat. Okay, now let me introduce you to nature's portable recorder. The so-called common starling is the most astonishing creature. I like to think of it as a portable recording device with 35 minutes of mono audio and remix capabilities. They have evolved to mimic other birds, but now living amongst us, they mimic our phone tapping, our conversations, without judgment or all our noises. And so I'm going to play you a little bit of that, and I've labeled some of the sources that I believe were the initial origin of these recordings. This is a starling, by the way, called The Mouth, who has his own Instagram account. I recommend following him. It's just wonderful. So.
Come on here. Ours. I.
No judgment.
Yeah.
How much can they record? Because this is astonishing. I mean, you have to remember the sound and reproduce it. And a cheeky researcher tried putting in a spectrogram of a portrait of the mouth itself to see if it could play it back. So this has been written into a spectrogram, so it's just a synthesized sound, which sounds like this. And they listened back to the recordings of the mouth later in the day, and among all these other whirs and clicks was this shape here. You can see the bird appearing, and it sounds like it. You can see the shape of the bird there, but how does it do that? I mean, it's polyphonic. I mean, they have astonishing larynxes, syrinxes, these birds, but still it's producing 3 or 4 notes at the same time in the exact shape. And you see that sort of gash across there. It's hypothesized that that's sort of like a modulating tone. Like if you've ever done any synthesis, you play one tone and then you do cutoff and frequency resonances. So it's doing this. So not only is it a portable recorder, it's a nature's re-synthesizer. Let's see how close it came. And the more we discover about animal song, the more complex it becomes. Let me tell you just the brief story of whales. See, in the 1950s, we didn't know much about whale song, but the US military set up a series of underwater microphones to spy on the Soviets. Instead of hearing submarines, they heard these astonishing sounds. God knows what they would have thought. This would last for 23 hours. This data was declassified and passed over to a team of scientists and mathematicians who used really early sonogram technology to print them out. It took hours to print out these shapes. And then by hand created a sort of whale notation to try and make sense of this all. And it turns out they found that rather than a series of random noises, the communication was made up of what they called units, into phrases, into themes, into songs, into sessions. And this is, of course, exactly how we structure music. We have this hierarchical system. Where notes become motifs, become phrases, become hypermeters, become pieces, become movements. I also love how early whale notation looks exactly like early human music notation. So these recordings were made popular in the 70s when Roger Payne released them on an album, and they were published in Science magazine, and then most effectively in the January 1979 issue of National Geographic, which was distributed globally in 25 languages and over 10 million copies sold. And because there was a vinyl inside of these humpback whales, it makes humpback whales the most successful single pressing artists of all time of any species, and a major influence on the world conservation movement. So what we thought were just the squawks of sounds of animal noises turns out to be not just random noises, but highly structured patterns. Look at the phrasing here. They're not just a random dice roll between them, they're clear phrases. And as Rothenberg says, they fit any conventional definition of music: structural, social, cultural, sonic, and economic, obviously. Whales have regional anthems, they share their songs, they have evolving musical cultures. They use deep water sonic distribution channels like underwater Spotify to talk to each other. And they use tempo and duration in a kind of more sophisticated way than we do, as actually a salient musical feature. So technology revealed this hidden music within whale song. But technology has this other power also. We can take the most quiet, smallest animal. This is a mouse heartbeat. I was working with these scientists and we managed to get data from this, for other reasons, from its heartbeat. And I wanted to give this humble little creature this majestic power. So I connected the data from the heartbeat to mega modulus synthesizer. And there's something majestic in this little creature making these huge sounds just from its heart alone. That's his heart pushing the machinery. Or we can take the structures that animals build, like a spider web, and use virtual sensors to turn them into harps. So what they build become musical instruments. Starlings move in a fascinating way. These chatterboxes have this elegant way of swarming, where they disguise themselves as big birds, maybe. And this movement, we can use technology to map onto musical parameters. How they move through the sky becomes this unfolding work. Or we can reverse the process, because we know now that that swarming comes from these algorithms they've invented, these simple rules. And we can give those simple rules to a computer to create virtual birds that move around and interact and teach us how to make music. But of course, we are animals too. So our behavior, our swarming, can be tracked. We can take a street and turn it into an orchestra. So for example, parking spaces can be the bass on the left, or a melody on the right, and the bus stops can play the keys. So as the day goes by, people unwittingly make this music. You'll start with the bass on the left. And as people park on the right, and buses go by, we'll start getting a melody. We could add other senses that make sense. For example, short-stay parking should be percussion, because you shouldn't use it too often, and illegal parking spots should be dissonant notes. So let's lay those on here. You hear that flutter note. Someone spills water on that, sets off the cymbal. And then as the day quietens, so does the music. But of course, there's a way that we are all more closely connected. Because if we run back that passage of time from now to the dawn of life, what happens is we collect all these species together in this musical hierarchy until we reach this point, this origin point, which is the ancestor to all living creatures. And of course, there we find DNA and RNA, which is probably the greatest compositional technique of all time. Why? Because it is both instruction and material. It tells itself how to grow. It holds within itself the logic of its own unfolding. And that is exactly what music does. Because from its simple beginnings, and through imitation and mutation, it evolves into these musical forms, endless and wonderful. And I don't know about you, but the truth of that interconnection fills me with a profound empathy for all our fellow humans and other animals. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.